Thanks for the invitation to speak at this meeting about switching therapy, why, when, and how, and particularly in the situation without resistance testing. Here are my disclosures. So why switch therapy? The main reasons for switching antiretroviral therapy are to increase efficacy of the regimen, to decrease the risk of future failure or risk of resistance, or to treat current failure, as well as to increase safety or tolerability if the patient's having a problem with side effects, or to decrease cost, either in a situation where the individual has to pay for their therapy or in a program setting, which is treating millions, where costs of regimens become an important issue in the selection of drugs. The main one I'm going to focus on in this talk is increasing efficacy in patients who are failing therapy. So when to switch therapy for treatment failure? Well, the WHO guidelines for the public health approach recommend diagnosing failure when there are 2 viral load values above 1,000 copies per ml, taken 12 weeks apart. And it's important that there's intensive adherence counseling prior to that second viral load test. And with this, in many studies, more than 50% of patients who have an initial viral load detectable will resuppress with intensive adherence counseling. So it's well worth waiting that time and doing that adherence counseling before considering switching a regimen. The approach to individualized treatment in resource-rich settings can be different in that people recommend sometimes lower thresholds, perhaps diagnosing failure with a viral load above 50 copies or 200 or 400 copies. But usually a repeat is recommended. And often there's a recommendation to use resistance testing to assess for the presence of mutations, which, if they're not present, might indicate non-adherence, or if they are present, might indicate irreversible failure of the regimen. So how to switch therapy for treatment failure without resistance testing? Well, I'm mainly going to focus on failure with an efavirenz-based regimen, because still most of the failures worldwide are with efavirenz-based regimens. And I'm going to talk about evidence from 2 large clinical trials, the EARNEST trial and the NADIA trial, which particularly address switching in settings without resistance testing. And then at the end, I'll just say a few words to extrapolate that to failure on a dolutegravir-based regimen or on a PI-based regimen, although this is largely evidence-free in these kind of settings. So for the longest time, the WHO have recommended a switch from a non-nucleoside-based regimen first line to a PI-based regimen in second line, and also switching the nucleosides. But in the 2018 guidelines, WHO changed to recommend switching from a failing efavirenz-based regimen to going on to dolutegravir plus 2 nucleosides as the second line regimen. But they maintained this recommendation of also switching the backbone. So for most people who are now taking a tenofovir-based first-line regimen, that means switching to zidovudine in second line, in each case with 3TC. So let's look at the evidence for switching of these regimens in settings without resistance testing. And the first trial I'll talk about is the EARNEST trial, which looked at switching from a failing efavirenz-based regimen to a PI-based regimen. And the trial had 3 arms. Patients who are failing non-nucleoside-based regimen were randomized to take a protease inhibitor, in this case lopinavir, plus 2 to 3 nucleosides selected by the clinician according to the local standard of care without resistance testing. And the second arm was a PI plus raltegravir, a brand new drug class. So we had 2 drugs without any cross-resistance from first-line failure. And then a third arm, which just had PI monotherapy alone, because at that time we believed that these nucleosides, when there was cross-resistance, would not be contributing very much to the second-line regimen. And importantly, this was done without resistance testing. So these nucleosides were selected without resistance testing. And the findings of the trial were most remarkable. So the PI and nucleoside arm shown in black, and then the PI and raltegravir arm shown in blue. And whichever viral load threshold we looked at, whether it was 1,000 copies, 400 or 50 copies, the response in the PI plus nucleoside arm was just as good as the PI plus raltegravir arm, telling us that protease inhibitor with recycled nucleosides is a very potent combination. We then looked at the nucleosides in more detail to try and find out and understand why they were contributing so much to the efficacy after switching. And the first thing we did was we looked back at the patient's resistance profile at trial entry, and we found that there was very high levels of resistance to 3TC. Almost everybody's virus had 3TC resistance, and the majority of patients' virus had tenofovir resistance, intermediate high level, or zidovudine resistance. And so this response was despite people having very high levels of resistance to the nucleosides. And we looked at it, categorized people according to the activity, the predicted activity of the nucleosides that they were actually prescribed in their second-line therapy. So those who had no predicted active nucleosides because of cross-resistance, who were in the majority, 59%, then those who had one predicted active nucleoside combined with a PI, and those who had two predicted active nucleosides, which was a very small number. And what we'd expect, so this is the protease inhibitor monotherapy arm, it's the suppression on monotherapy. This is the suppression with protease inhibitor plus raltegravir. And what you would expect for people who have a protease inhibitor with recycled nucleosides with no predicted nucleoside activity, you would expect them to perform close to the PI monotherapy arm. But what we found was that people with no active nucleosides predicted did very well. Those nucleosides contributed massively to the performance of the regimen, even though there was extensive cross-resistance. And the same thing with one predicted active nucleoside also did extremely well. The other piece of evidence I'm going to talk about is from the NADIA trial. And the NADIA trial investigated switching from a failing efavirenz-based regimen to two nucleosides plus dolutegravir, again, without resistance testing. And NADIA trial sought to answer two questions. First of all, whether dolutegravir is non-inferior to a protease inhibitor in the public health approach, where you're using nucleosides with extensive resistance and without resistance testing to select the drugs. And we also wanted to ask the question, can you maintain tenofovir from first line to second line therapy without resistance testing, without selecting new nucleosides, or without the WHO recommended algorithmic switch? So two questions in NADIA. And this was the trial design. We enrolled people failing on an efavirenz-based regimen, and we randomized them to receive dolutegravir or darunavir, the best-in-class PI, and tenofovir versus zidovudine. And we followed them for 96 weeks, with the primary outcome being viral load suppression at 48 weeks. And it was a very simple trial, and importantly, the monitoring was done relatively sparse, following WHO recommendations. And again, there was no real-time resistance testing at the time for switch from first line to second line. We just did resistance testing when there was confirmed viral load rebound. And the trial was done in sub-Saharan Africa, but I think the findings are generalizable to all program settings, and in fact to individual patient care as well. So the trial enrolled 400 participants over a period of 6 months, and followed them for a year to the primary outcome. Virtually everybody remained on their assigned regimen, and there was very low rates of loss to follow-up. Just one patient was lost to follow-up during the entire trial period. This table shows the patient characteristics. They were similar between the randomized groups, but essentially it was a predominantly female population. Patients were failing with low CD4 count, and about 30% had a viral load above 100,000 copies. So, and many A high proportion had the K65R, the characteristic mutation to tenofovir, and 90% had a 184V, so giving high level resistance to lamivudine. So here are the key findings. Firstly, comparing dolutegravir with darunavir, and we can see that both of these regimens, dolutegravir or darunavir, give equivalent and very high levels of viral load suppression after switch, and the rates of rebound during that year are very low, around 5%. And just 4 cases, there were 4 cases of dolutegravir resistance within the first year, none in the darunavir group. The key point here is that when we look at the subgroup of people who had no predicted active nucleosides, so those people who had extensive resistance to the nucleosides they were prescribed in second-line therapy, they did just as well on dolutegravir or darunavir. In fact, they had very high levels of response, 92, 93% overall. Again, telling us that selecting drugs by resistance testing, you don't need to select highly active drugs, nucleosides, to get a good response with either a dolutegravir or a darunavir-based regimen. And then the second question, which was the tenofovir versus zidovudine question, again, very high levels of suppression, and there was no suggestion that maintaining tenofovir in second-line therapy was any less good than switching to zidovudine, which again tells us that that resistance testing, you can get very good results without resistance testing just by maintaining the tenofovir. And again, to make that point again, even in patients with a K65R, you'd be predicted to have high levels of resistance to tenofovir. They get very good responses, just the same as zidovudine. And again, very good responses for patients who have got a 184V mutation to lamivudine. So the conclusions from the NADIA trial is that dolutegravir and 2 nucleosides gives excellent viral load suppression in second line, even if given with nucleosides with no predicted activity. And it's non-inferior to darunavir when you have a population and monitoring strategy typical of the public health approach without resistance testing. So it supports the safety of switching programmatically efavirenz to dolutegravir, or certainly when you've got patients with failure, even if you can't do a pre-switch viral load or resistance testing. And as far as tenofovir and 3TC is concerned, with either dolutegravir or darunavir, you get excellent viral suppression in second line, even with patients who've got a K65R or 184B mutation or both. And it's non-inferior to switching to zidovudine or 3TC. So what are the implications of the NADIA trial results for regimen switching from a failing dolutegravir or PI-based regimen? So far, I've talked about switching from a failing non-nucleoside-based regimen, a efavirenz-based regimen, and shown that you can do that very successfully without resistance testing. You can switch to either dolutegravir, or you can switch to a protease inhibitor and maintain the tenofovir, or switch to zidovudine without doing any more difficult selection of drugs than that. But what about if a patient is on dolutegravir first line, or PI first line or second line, and they're failing on that regimen? Can we extrapolate from what we know from NADIA? So firstly, for a dolutegravir regimen failure, we know that there's a very low risk of dolutegravir resistance in a 2 nucleoside and dolutegravir regimen failure. Usually the resistance is to the nucleosides. So in terms of switching, you need to have a high threshold for switching because you're unlikely to do harm to the dolutegravir. So first of all, make sure you do adherence counseling very robustly, and then repeat the viral load before switching. And if you decide to switch, patients are likely to do well with a protease inhibitor and 2 nucleosides. Again, because in NADIA, we've shown that even with compromised nucleosides, you get a very good response to a protease inhibitor, and that's unlikely to be any different if you're switching from efavirenz to a PI nucleoside-based regimen than if you're switching from dolutegravir nucleosides to a PI nucleoside-based regimen. And you've got, again, the choice if you can just simply maintain the tenofovir or switch to an algorithmic choice of nucleosides. And then if a patient's on a PI regimen and they're failing on that, we also know that there's relatively low resistance risk with a PI. Most of the resistance is going to be the nucleosides. So again, you can have a high threshold for switching. Make sure you do good adherence counseling first. But if you decide to switch, then we know from Nadia that the patients are likely to do well with dolutegravir and 2 nucleosides, even if the nucleosides have got extensive resistance, and choosing the nucleosides without resistance testing. So you can either continue tenofovir or you could switch to zidovudine or some other combination. So essentially what we have now, assuming that the non-nucleoside based regimens are going to be phased out, either you can start with non-nucleoside if you're still using that and just work through the changes, but assuming that non-nucleoside regimens becoming less used, we've essentially got 2 robust regimens, dolutegravir plus tenofovir 3-TC, and a protease inhibitor, probably best darunavir, with a tenofovir and 3-TC nucleoside combination. And these appear, at least from Nadia, from extrapolating the results, these are probably fully interchangeable. So you can just use them taking into account other factors of tolerability and cost, just use them in the best sequence for your patients. So let me acknowledge, I've shown some data from second-line trials, particularly the Nadia trial, which was done in Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Kenya, and coordinated from the Infectious Disease Institute in Uganda. And I've shown the people contributing here. And if you want to read more about this trial and its interesting findings for switching therapy after failing on a favirenz-based regimen, then you can read that in the New England Journal of Medicine that was published in July 2021. So thanks very much for your attention, and I hope that was useful.